the activists won't let anything be. Yes. You know, if we decide, okay, you know, we're going to do this, we're going to live in community, we're going to do these things, activists will never allow that to go because they're going to find something wrong with it. It's going to be some kind of phobe, whatever. And that's on both sides. And they're going to have to tear everything down because that's what the fringes do. They don't care about building up their own side. They only care about tearing down the other side to make sure the other side doesn't win. And I bet a lot of activists feel really proud of themselves over that. That's no way to define yourself because it becomes very toxic.
I'm Parker.
And I'm Tim.
And this is the Rage Podcast, where today we're going to discuss activists.
And how bad they are.
Great first sentence into the of the video.
We didn't want to leave it in suspense as to where we were on this topic, so yeah.
So it is June again. I think I started also the last week's video like that, but it's June. It's Pride Month. A lot of activist type of things going on. And Tim, I think it would be good for us to first define what are we talking about? What is an activist?
If you look at the entire continuum of you know, people who are on the LGBTQ, you know, all the way off the one side, you take the people who are against that group and they're all the way over in the other, and you've got this kind of range. We're talking about the people who are on the fringes. You know, 95% of the people are going to be somewhere in the middle. Yeah, we may have disagreements and we may not be totally happy with redefining marriage and those kind of things, of course. But for the most part, most people are willing to respect each other and love each other and give people space to do what they're going to do. It's the activists on either side that won't allow that. And they're the ones that seem to, I don't know, stoke up the controversy. And you know, we've seen some examples of that during June. If you've been watching the news at all, you know there was a big to-do at the White House. And this is one that just it bothers me. They had the pride flag hanging in the middle, and then it was flanked by the two American flags. There's nothing that should have been in that spot. So for the White House to put the pride flag there, that's activism. That's a cram down from on high, where the elected officials of our nation have said, all right, we're going to make this so important that we're going to use the visual of two American flags with the pride flag in the middle. And I had a real problem with that. That was upsetting because I feel like that was just a kind of an in your eye kind of thing. Yeah. And that was tough.
I think also, what's important to note about activism is we normally hear that word and we think of a good connotation behind it. Mm-hmm. We think, oh yeah, it's good to, you know, be an activist for the things that are needed. But normally in today's worldview, and we're talking again as the almost extreme activism of a certain side, it normally doesn't involve the building up of anything, but rather the belittling, right? We'll obviously use the key and prime example, Pride Month, right? You have activists that are very, you know, set for the LGBTQ community, and you have activists that are solely against everything that Pride Month takes place. And because of that, you have these two activists not really doing anything but trying to belittle the other side. So you're not building up. All you're trying to do is twist the knife hard enough to hopefully the other side will shut up.
And that's a good point, because one of the things that we see happening is both of the extreme sides define themselves by not liking the other side. And that's the left and the right. Both are just opposing whatever's going on. And see, the problem with that is if we picture this as a pendulum. The pendulum is kind of how people behave and what they do. Well, if the activists drag that pendulum too far one way, it's going to swing back the other way, because the people on the other side are going to be looking to pull the pendulum to come back their way, and it's going to swing back across. And once it gets so far over there, the activists on this side are going to get mad, and they're going to pull it back, and everybody's pushing and pulling on it, and that's what makes the pendulum swing so hard. And the image that I have with that is when the pendulum swings, it doesn't hit the edges. It hits all the people in the middle, the people who just, you know, are trying to work and raise their kids and have safe communities. And the activists could care less. It doesn't hit them hard enough to do anything.
Yeah, it doesn't affect them in any way. But when we have that pendulum swing, what that hit looks like is saying, well, now, say you are a part of this community, or say, you know, well, let's take it this way. Tim, we are both Christians. In fact, we're both pastors. We are fairly representatives of the faith and at some form of level in our communities and so forth. So we have this title, right? And sadly, in the Christian faith, there are many activists that take that pendulum ball and do in a way that I don't want to be a part of. I don't think Christ would want us to be a part of, out of the anger and hatred that some activists tend to have. So they take that, and in that process, me and Tim are wiped out in the downfall of that swing.
Because all the two sides want to do is knock each other over, but the pendulum doesn't swing hard enough to hit them over there. It hits everybody in the middle.
Everyone in the middle.
Who's just trying to say, look, I want to raise my kids. I want to have a safe community. I want to have friends. I want to go to church. You know, I want to live my life. And they're the ones getting smacked by that pendulum as it comes through.
And I think I feel like what should be the goal of every human being is to one day live in harmony, right? None of us are ever going to be able to agree entirely, right? We're all unique individuals. But hopefully, one day we can recognize that truth and live in the fact of knowing, I don't agree with everyone. So be it, right? And that's just the case. There's no reason for me to be this high and mighty activist to try to convert everyone to my level of thought. And I'm not talking here about Christianity. You know, obviously converting people to the faith, glorious, great, grand. Yet within that faith are still several disagreements and disputes, right?
Yeah, the activists won't let anything be. Yes. You know, if we decide, okay, you know, we're going to do this, we're going to live in community, we're going to do these things, activists will never allow that to go because they're going to find something wrong with it. It's going to be some kind of phobe, whatever. And that's on both sides. And they're going to have to tear everything down because that's what the fringes do. They don't care about building up their own side. They only care about tearing down the other side to make sure the other side doesn't win. And that doesn't do anything but just wreck everything it comes into contact with.
Talking from a Christian's perspective, look at how God works, right? God, of course, would like people to, recognize him as Lord, would like people to, live in the statutes that he has set. But God isn't forcing anyone to be on his side, to be with him.
Well, that's right. He allows free will. That's exactly. The very concept of free will is that you get to choose your side.
And the part of free will is saying, you know what? There's going to be people then that don't want this. That's the big concept of free will, and God recognized that. Not saying that God likes to see people go out and kind of stray away from him. Obviously not, but God's not going to force someone and belittle that person, especially in saying, well, if you're not with me, then I'm just going to, squash you out or whatever it is. That's not how God works. But let's look at the opposite side of God for a second. Let's look at Satan here. What does Satan do the second he gets into the garden? Satan starts talking to Eve and starts saying, are you sure? He would have really said, do you think you're really knowledgeful enough to really know this? Started to belittle Eve's knowledge. And as a result of that, she got to a point where she felt so vulnerable and so in the loop that we have the whole fall of mankind take place in that single event.
God was swinging the pendulum one day, Satan was swinging the other, and Eve got caught in the middle. And Adam did too. And that's where the whole thing got knocked over. I saw this come into full living color back in 2001. Billy Graham came and did a crusade in Cincinnati when I was down there. And it was the morning session on Saturday because it was kind of 3 or 4 days of services and different things. And it was Saturday morning, and they had a special thing happening for kids. It was, they had special music and special presentations. And so I'm at Paul Brown Stadium where the Cincinnati Bengals play. And, thousands of people are going into to Paul Brown Stadium, and it was just this massive thing. And right in the middle of this was a protester, and I wish I could remember exactly what he was protesting, but I remember his sign. His sign said, Billy Graham leads people to hell. If you know anything about Billy Graham, that's probably not an accurate description of what Billy Graham does by any stretch of the imagination. But I can remember him being there. He was waving the sign around, and people started to heckle him a little bit, and he started to fire back at him. And he had a speech impediment. He stuttered really bad. I just remember that all these years later. And he was yelling at them, and parents were yelling at him. And I'm telling you, it was ugly. The sign the man was holding wasn't great, but the cuss words that the parents of the kids bringing him into this Christian thing, that wasn't so great either. So you talk about a pendulum. You got this guy here who's saying Billy Graham makes people go to hell. You got parents who say that's not true and you can go to hell. Who's caught in the middle? All those children who got to see their parents cussing out some guy who couldn't hardly spit out a sentence. I don't agree with the guy, obviously, but I felt bad for him. I felt bad for him because between these two sides, between the parents who just wanted to protect their kids, which is not wrong, I'm just not sure that yelling cuss words at one guy in a cast of thousands was the way to do that. Between him and the parents, the children were the one caught in the middle. Do they remember anything about being at Billy Graham that day? I don't know, but I bet they remember that guy in the parking lot.
Even more. I bet they remember their mom and dad cussing out the guy in the parking lot, right?
Yeah.
Those are often when you talk about family stories, those are the kind of ones, sadly, you remember.
Right. And all the work that went into the production, which I'm sure was a lot.
Yeah.
Who knows what kind of impact that had.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
So, yeah.
And it's so difficult in our culture today to try to look past our differences and just making sure everyone has human decency.
Yeah, that's it.
I mean, because in this, again, right back to the very first chapters of Genesis, where so much of everything in this world is revealed, right? Obviously, all of its creation is there, but then so many of the problems we face are all come to full effect in Genesis 2. But go to the very beginning of Genesis, right? When God's creating mankind in his image. If God created us in his image, we people, human beings, are the most valuable looking created creature in the world. And that is a hard pill to swallow, especially when you are yelling at a creature, when you're yelling at that human
to the image.
Created in the image of God. You're yelling at a masterpiece of God's work. And when you think of it like that, man, does it really shift our perspective? Yeah. Do we not do we still strive to swing the pendulum here and there and so forth? Or are we going to recognize that, wait a second, all of these people are human beings created in the image of God, and because of that, they have a worth that surpasses any form of dollar amount in this world.
And activists don't allow for that.
Yes.
All they want to do is destroy the other side as the enemy, and that's not how we were created.
Activists want to take the image that every human in this world has and belittle it, make it something that is grotesque, make it something that is evil, right? And I want to kind of comment on this, though. We're talking about activists, and sometimes, yes, activists do good things to a certain extent, right? But that's activism that requires a building up rather than a tearing down, right? There's a big difference there, and I think what we see in the media a lot anymore today is activists that aren't trying to build anything up, but rather just tear each other down. Just continue to throw it one side to another, and as a result of that, we will never come up with any solutions. We'll never come up with the great sense of peace that we all want, because all we want to do is fight fire with fire, right?
And what that creates is an incredible amount of collateral damage. We are literally living through this right now with the United Methodist Church. Activists came in and wanted something to change, some bedrock foundational things that many in the Methodist Church didn't go along with. So it's causing the church to split. And the activists on both sides are probably proud of that, but most of us in the middle, guys like me and Parker, are like, man, you guys destroyed a beautiful institution that, I don't know what's going to happen with it. I don't know what the future of it's going to be. But the United Methodist Church is collateral damage of these activists who just would not compromise, would not give in, would not come to the table. Everything was their way or the highway. And when one side wouldn't leave, the other side did. And that's what caused the disaffiliation movement in the United Methodist Church we have now. And I bet a lot of activists feel really proud of themselves over that. I don't. I don't think it was a good thing. I think it was a necessary thing given where we were, but I don't feel like it was a good thing. To me, when we disaffiliated, I didn't feel like spiking the football or anything like that. I feel like it's the result of the collateral damage that happens when the two sides just hate each other with such vitriol that they'd rather burn it down than let it stand.
Dehumanizing.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you look at, if we're going to talk about the United Methodist situation, right? Look at some annual conferences and see how they're handling disaffiliated churches. You want to talk about dehumanizing, devaluing local churches that I'm sure still do great sources of senses of good for their communities and in this world. It's not. I don't understand why this is always hard for us to recognize. When are we going to realize that? Yes, we disagree doesn't mean you lose your worth. Doesn't mean you are become some foreign alien-like creature that we must eliminate, or And this is a saying that's really picked up in recent culture, but referring to people as cancer, right? And I'm not talking about your signs here. I'm talking about people will call another group of people or another person a cancer. And you just got to cut them out. You got to what? Dehumanize them, diminish everything they say, diminish every thing they try to do. I think that's the greatest foothold Satan has in our society today, is how easy he has let us come to the point where it's just natural for us to dehumanize a person created in the sole image of God. I mean, that's ridiculous on mankind's part.
And we get to that just because you don't live up to the standard I've set, or you don't agree with me, or we can't agree to disagree and love each other anyways. And that's the problem. And I think, getting kind of the call to action part of the episode here, I think what really needs to happen is we need to consider just ignoring the other side. There needs to be watchdogs, and if something happens that is truly egregious and we need to defend it, absolutely that needs to happen. But we spend a lot of time watching podcasts and watching the news and seeing what's going on. I mean, we all saw the pride parades with some of that debauchery that was going on there that does not represent the LGBTQ community at large. We saw, we mentioned the thing at the White House, which was a disgrace. Just a lot of those things that are happening, pictures that were taken and things that were going on the White House lawn. Yes, those things need to be responded to, and we need to say that should not be happening in a place as sacred as the White House. But at the same time, there's a lot that goes on out there that, just ignore it. It's angering, but don't think that the whole community is out to get you or out to recruit you to the other side. Again, whichever side of the argument you're even on, there's kind of a lot of a boogeyman syndrome going on with both sides. And I feel like that's part of the problem. We who are in the middle, and yes, Parker and I are probably on the right side of the middle, but we're still in the middle. We need to make a stand and say, okay, here's our principles, here's our core values, here's why we exist, here's what we're going to promote. We want the gospel to be promoted, and we want to promote Jesus and things. That's not activism. That's building something. Because look, if somebody says, I'm not interested in Jesus, all right, I don't think it's going to work out well for you, but I'm not gonna bash you.
You can't force them.
Exactly.
You're not going to dehumanize them. Because in the first place, talking about Christians, if you're wanting someone to come to Christ, it's because you're wanting them to recognize the God who created them.
Which, again, to do that in a hateful manner negates exactly what you're trying to do.
Yes.
And sure, we could say we don't agree. Absolutely, we don't agree. Yes, there's plenty of things going on in the culture that Parker and I have made episodes about stuff that we don't agree with. But at the same time, to live your whole life defining yourself as I'm not that, that's not a definition. Don't allow yourself to get into a place where all I want to do is destroy the other side. Because, again, examples of that abound. And that's no way to define yourself, because it becomes very toxic. I don't want to say cancer, because Parker said no, I would say that. But it becomes very toxic because all you're doing is going around to find something you can destroy rather than what you can actually help.
And I think, as Tim said, ignore. Don't think ignore means to still, again, belittle, dehumanize, reject. Ignore.
Exactly.
Ignore just means recognize that person can do what they want in this moment in time, can say what they want, but I'm not going to let it affect me, right?
I'm not going to condone it. But I'm not going to live my life around it either.
I'm not going to let it take over and make my whole personality out of my anger towards this person, right? Ignore just means, all right, he's doing his thing and I'm going to look this way.
Even if I'm concerned about that man's soul or that person's soul, then of course you should go engage them in conversation, but you don't go over to say, we're just going to nuke this thing. We're going to burn it all the way to the ground, because that's too many activists are out there doing that, and too many people in the middle are getting hurt. So somewhere, somebody's got to stop pushing the pendulum.
And that's all I got.
That's all we got. So everybody, be safe, be well, listen, make a stand when you need to, but just don't define yourself by what you hate, because that's going to lead you no place good.
Have a great week.
Take care, everybody.
recognizing, yeah, we're not